Welcome to the Midwest Moguls Show, where we talk all things business, real estate, and entrepreneurship. Let's dive into today's episode and make business enjoyable again. Welcome back to the Midwest Moguls Show. It is Joe and I in the studio today. We are running through, for those of you guys who are interested, how to run numbers on deals and how to properly do it so you don't, first off, lose money, so you don't, or so you're not able to, or so you don't run into a deal that you have to eventually back out on or whatever the case is. So there's a few different things that we had wrote down here on the handy dandy paper that we are going to reference this entire conversation just to make it flow better, to pack it full of information so you guys can easily decipher it, go through it, and ultimately learn how to contract a property at the right price. Okay. So first things first, when we talk about running numbers on properties, we're specifically talking in the essence for this conversation, primarily on flipping and wholesaling. Just maybe a little bit of innovation, but flipping and wholesaling mainly because it's most applicable to what we're currently doing and then what the viewers, listeners, watchers are doing as well. But the first thing that we always do, and I'll have Joe kind of brush up on this a little bit, is you have to determine what the actual after repair value is of a property. And that's generally done through comparable sales, also known as comps. So what does that process look like, Joe, from your perspective when an owner calls in property on 123 Main Street, maybe it's a ranch style house, but they haven't given you square footage, bedrooms, bathrooms, anything like that. What is your first step in the process?
So first step is for sure looking up the property, either on Zillow or on PropStream. Usually that's where you're going to find your information on square footage, bedrooms, baths. And if you don't have that, that's when you want to obviously, reach out and talk to the homeowner, get that information. But when it comes to running comps, you want to usually stay in.
Well, let me pause you for a second.
Go ahead.
With, like, say Zillow has no information, it's never sold. PropStream has zero information. It's never sold in the past 30 years or 40 years. What is the next resource that you go to? Do you go to, how do you find that information? If the owner doesn't even know off the top of their head, you ask them, but they inherited the place and they're like, Joe, I have no idea.
Then the next step would, probably best thing to do is go on the county records. So going on the county records, property, information, and searching up the property. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, they'll have all the information that you need for that property. So that's probably where I would start there.
So it's like if you guys are listening right now, type in whatever county you're in, Milwaukee County, Winnebago County is where we live. Winnebago County property search or your local city property search, and you can typically find the assessment records is specifically what you're trying to get. That'll say at least the square footage. And then if you ask the owner, it's like how many bedrooms are in the house or whatever the scripting is for that. But okay, so you established that this particular house, the sample one that you're using is a 3-bed, 1-bath, about 1,000 square foot ranch. Then what do you do?
So then I look where the house is located. And usually I do like a diameter. It gives, I don't know, it varies definitely on how far you kind of go out, but usually I stay within the neighborhood. Now, if there's like a main street that's going on, through the neighborhood, usually I'll stay on the side the property's on versus going on the other side. And then I am looking for properties that have the same characteristics. Meaning it has 3 beds, 1 bath. Baths can vary, 1.5, maybe 2. But around that 3-bed, 1 bath, and then square footage, if it's 1,000 square feet, I'll be searching for houses anywhere from basically 300 square feet plus or minus. And that gives you a good idea on that basically average property sale price for that specific type of property. And I'm looking specifically at ranch style houses. Now, if there's ones that are coming up, it's a triplex or it's, or not triplex, but like a bi-level, 2-story. Those ones I'm going to usually keep out of that list because it's not similar.
Like kind.
They're gonna the prices are gonna vary a little bit different for those types of properties.
And all that we're doing, like when we're establishing comparable sales for property or comps, I always look at it from the reference point of if an appraiser is going to come in here and appraise this property for whatever it's worth. What do they have to include in their report? They cannot compare a ranch-style house to a two-story. Exactly. Generally, it does not fly on the appraisal report because the lenders will see it, and then they'll void that altogether, make the appraiser redo it. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're comparing like kind to like kind, so again, 3-bedroom ranches to other 3-bedroom ranches, 1,000 square foot ranches to 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 square foot ranches, they all have a similar makeup to them, and they all look generally the same. Now, a 1,000 square foot ranch to an 1,800 square foot one, that's going to be drastically different, typically a different year build, so on and so forth. But you get the concept. So say we're looking at it. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to stop because another thing, especially it's a big thing in Wisconsin, is garages.
Garage.
So
huge. What about basements?
Basements as well.
Yep. I didn't think about that one.
Same thing. When you're looking at these properties, if you're seeing houses that, say the property that you're trying to find comps for has a 1-car detached garage. Take that in consideration. If you're seeing pretty much all the other properties have 2-car attached garages, you're going to want to, basically adjust the pricing accordingly. And I'm curious, what would you do in that situation?
So it's like when say the subject property has a 1-car garage, and then there's a comparable sale that has a 2-car garage. Normally I subtract off between, depending upon the condition of the garage and if it's attached, detached, but if it's both detached, then I would probably subtract off $6,000 to $10,000 for that additional garage space. And that's, again, it's just going off of experience and what appraisers do the same thing on their side. So you can kind of factor that in.
And just so everybody knows, like we stay on the conservative side.
Very.
Now, some people, they could do, $2,000 maybe difference. We just always want to be on the safe side. That way, if it does pan out where it is a big difference like that, $10,000 difference, we have calculated for that, and we're not going to shoot ourselves in the foot and lose our profits.
And then same with basements. And I don't know if you make a pretty considerable adjustment, but in Wisconsin, at least, basements are extremely common. Almost every single house has one. So if you run across a house that is on a slab or it's on a crawl space, not having that basement, I typically subtract off between 10 to 15,000 because it is a deterrent. And the market's been good, so it hasn't been as significant. But when years ago in 2015, 2016, a house without a basement could sit for another month and a half or 2 months and add on to the holding costs, which we'll address later in this video. But those are all things that need to be considered.
Definitely.
And once you start perfecting that, I know we went when you were first getting in the industry, it's like, hey, look at all these these houses that are currently listed for sale. Maybe just do some research, see how the real estate agents or whomever determine their list price by looking at similar like-kind properties that have sold.
And you can practice this.
It's easy. Like
I usually would do, like, starting out, I'd basically make it a task for myself where I would look up at least like 5 to 10 properties and try and find comps and go through the whole process, what to look for, what not to. And like you said, properties that are either have already sold or are listed, see, where that comparison is.
Correct.
Oh, this is interesting. Like, this property doesn't have a garage, but this one does. They're in the same, neighborhood, same specs, but the one without the garage is $10,000 less. So,
and with comps, this is the last thing, then we'll kind of move on to the next. With comps, if you're 5 to 10% off on the value, the after repair value of the property, that's pretty significant. It could be a $10,000 to $20,000 difference on ARV. With a rehab cost, if you're 5 to 10% off, that might be $2,000 to $5,000. So it's like you would rather be off on a renovation versus on the actual resale value or refinance value, than on the anything else in the process. But okay, so we established comps.
Next step,
you're going through that. You got the value in your mind. It's a $220,000 house once it's renovated. And you're just looking at the list of houses that have sold. How updated are they? That's one thing that we didn't mention. And if your house is more updated, generally it'll sell for more money. But we kind of run ours, again, on the conservative side that, okay, worst case scenario, it sells for the same amount that these do. Okay, so $220,000. Now establishing a renovation estimate or a rehab estimate. what do you do for that process?
Yeah. So obviously go on a walkthrough, or if you're not able to do the walkthrough, have someone do it for you.
Yep.
Take photos looking at the property. And I like to kind of, I guess, separate certain things into groups. So for like kitchen, I'm going to look at, or basically rehabbing a kitchen, bathroom,
Yep.
Flooring, paint, and then obviously you have your heating or I guess electrical,
Yep.
and then plumbing. So everything that's in the kitchen, meaning countertops, cabinets, appliances, that's all going to be grouped together, and then get a basis of, okay, what's the average cost for rehabbing a typical kitchen?
Yeah.
And that's what we use going off of our sheet, you know, on a low end, like that $6,000 or so.
Yeah.
So I would do that. And if say electrical is iffy, just budget for replacing electrical, and have a general cost for what that would averagely cost.
And for us, like electrical plumbing, we normally budget between $1,500 to $3,000 per occurrence, because it's like you could have a water heater go out tomorrow. That's going to be $1,500 or $1,600 or whatever after labor and material. So being a little bit more conservative, again, it puts you in a better position if you end up getting the deal versus it's like, oh shoot, now we need to somehow make these numbers work, because my rehab estimate based upon the contractor estimates that I've gotten is already coming in $15,000 over budget. So if you budget for it ahead of time, then you should be a little bit more safe at the end of it. So, okay. And if you guys need a rehab estimator, just drop a comment down below. I'll send you our Excel spreadsheet. I'm more than willing to do that. And then it breaks down all these different line items. There's probably 120 different ones on there. And it's extremely beneficial when going through it. So, okay, we have ARV established through comparable sales. So we got ARV, we have rehab estimate. Now we need to factor in a profit margin. So how do you look at that? Is there a flat number that you use when renovate or when looking at purchasing a flip property, or what do you do on your side, Joe?
Yeah. So, I mean, typically what I do is I like to stay right around the 25, usually 25 is pretty low. But around like the $30,000 to $35,000 profit. And that's just because the houses that we're working on, the way that I look at it is, okay, if this project is going to cost us $35,000, I want to at least be making right around that amount after sticking that money into it. Now on a project, say the house is, $300,000, property once it's all fixed up, but it's going to need about $100,000 stuck into it.
Repairs.
You're going to want to basically compensate or reward yourself for putting in that much. If it's that high of a risk,
correct,
you better have a higher reward. So then that number would jump up to, around that 40 to 45.
And it's, you're always safer running it off of like a lower number. And you can always come up. You can't really go down after agreeing to something with an owner. So it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm going to offer them $60,000 to start or $70,000, but I can come up to 85 if I really need to. Now you don't want to be offensive and then just take the whole deal off the plate, but that's kind of the basis for establishing some sort of value. And like you had mentioned with renovations, if there's a lot more risk, then you want more reward for it.
Exactly.
Because the more risky a project is, if you have no experience or very little experience, you're taking on this debt typically to buy them. You're spending cash out of pocket in most cases. So it's like, well, you need to earn something. And if it takes a little bit longer, you want your return on investment just to be there. So I'm in agreement with you there. And then for you guys who are inexperienced on the renovation side of things, what Joe and I were talking about is realistically, if you have a crew of contractors working at the job site, you can factor in, if your rehab budget's about $30,000, you can factor in $500 to $1,000 a day in spend. So that a $30,000 rehab should roughly take you about 30 to 40 days, roughly speaking, of people on the job. So that could be like a month and a half if you don't take into consideration weekends. So, okay, so we established the renovation estimates and everything like that. And of course, there's the holding cost to every single property that you buy. And holding costs.
What goes into that?
So you're going to have real estate commissions. Obviously, that'll be taken out. You're going to have monthly property taxes. You're going to have insurance payments. You're going to have utility bills. lawn keeping, snow removal, whatever the case is. You have all these different line items that factor into the holding costs. And generally speaking, what we do, the simplest way to calculate this is subtract 10% off the top.
Yeah.
So if you're going to sell it for $200,000, subtract about $20,000 right off the top for commissions, taxes, insurance, all of these different things. And that is a very safe way of going about it. Now, generally speaking, you can negotiate down real estate commissions. So maybe you're not going to have that full 10% in holding costs, but if your project takes longer, it's going to make up for it. So that's kind of a general rule of thumb on our side. And it depends on your financing costs and everything like that.
I just want to kind of, so now that we talked about all this, to bring it all together, how it kind of looks is what we do is, okay, we find our comps, we get our ARV. So we have now $220,000 ARV. So how we calculate it is then multiplying that ARV by 0.9, meaning 10% in closing costs, holding costs. All that's going to be basically calculated. After that, we subtract basically profit that we're looking to make, and then cost of repairs. And that's how we then determine where our offer basically price will be right around there. And sometimes we bring that number down a little bit more. Just
of course, if you're negotiating or whatever.
For negotiation, everything like that. But at least you know what your maximum allowable offer is going to be.
So it's, again, to go over that. So it's ARV times 0.9 or minus 10%, minus renovation costs, minus profit. And that's your max allowable offer.
Correct.
And ideally, if you're looking at wholesaling it or whatever, then minus off a wholesale fee as well. And then feel free to come in at whatever number you desire, but that's the max dollar amount that someone can most likely pay for the place. And if someone can renovate it for cheaper, if they think it's worth more, fantastic. You can still make a margin out of it, but that's kind of the general gist of running numbers on properties and everything like that. And this is, again, specifically for flip and wholesale deals. But like, what are the different exit strategies when you're going in there? And we'll touch on this in the next episode, so you guys stay tuned for the exit strategies, where we dive into those in a lot more detail than we're going to in this episode. But like exit strategies. So you're assuming at those numbers that we just discussed, is that a flip deal? Is that a wholesale deal? Or what are you thinking, Joe?
Yeah. So after calculating all that, that's going to be where our flip deal, where we purchase it and we'll be flipping this property. And then also the number can fluctuate just a little bit to then get your wholesale basically deal as well. And then another, another potential way to look at it is another exit strategy would just be not even putting our contract, just as basically doing like a finder's fee and sending it over to someone else, another,
see if they'll pay a $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, whatever it is.
But you did all that work. You got the numbers. You have, basically a seller that's at this price. And that's another type of exit strategy without actually taking on that responsibility of putting on a contract.
So you have multiple ways of looking at things, but I think if people run numbers in this fashion, somewhat conservatively, and you can shoot for the stars or whatever, if you think it's going to be worth $240 instead of $220 like we established, then fantastic. And as long as the comparable sales support that, then everyone can be on the same page. You should be able to sell that deal, whether you're flipping it yourself or you're wholesaling it out. So we just take the more conservative approach because we've lost money on deals. We don't want that to happen. So it's always easier to, again, you can come up on the number. You can't really go down unless you establish if you're making offers over the phone or whatever the case is.
Correct.
So I think that's probably it for this episode. So we'll wrap it there. Appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoyed the content or if you have questions, drop a comment down below. Email either Joe or myself or reach out to us. But appreciate you guys as always. We'll see you in the next one.